And we're back. Thanks for staying with us. On nutrition this morning, we will be looking at a myth, stubborn fats. Now, the question is, does stubborn fat exist? Well, to let us know if it is a myth or a fact is Bode Agbe Davis. She's a certified fitness trainer and transformation specialist. She's well known for the Body Create method. She also focuses on guiding women, especially those aged 35 and above, in making simple and sustainable changes to their mindset, habits, and routines. You're welcome to the show.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. Now, let's get right into it. Stubborn fats.
Yes.
Are there or are there not stubborn fats?
Okay, I hope people don't hate me for this, but there hardly is stubborn fat, to be honest. So when a person says they have stubborn fat, what do they really mean? Okay. They're usually referring to fat, usually in specific areas, right? So for women, we tend to touch here, maybe the hips, and it's fat that isn't moving as fast as they would want it to, or maybe their body has changed and they've settled into this much rounder shape over the years, and it just looks like they've stuck with this fat for a while. Okay. So that's really what people mean when they say stubborn fat. But really, it's not that stubborn. If people do the right things with their nutrition and diet, and they do it consistently and the line of word, consistently and are patient, eventually that fat will move.
Now let's break it. Let's go down right to the diets. I mean, to our nutrition. Right. First off, let us look out for areas which because you said stubborn fats fats are being stored in some areas. Yes. So what are the areas in the body that these fats are noticeable? Okay. Then we get right into the nutrition.
So I think it's good to talk about two types of fat and differentiate them. So we have fat everywhere in our body, right? We're bones, we're muscle, we're fat, we're blood, and all of that. So we usually have the subcutaneous fat, which is usually the one that is right under the skin. So that's one you can pinch right there. Yeah. And then there's the visceral fat. Now that's usually the one for concern, because this is the one deep inside the belly that wraps around the organs, right? So when you start to have this really, we call it a bare belly, usually for guys, or that pot protruding belly, that is something to be worried about, because then there's visceral fat wrapping around the organs, and that can lead to chronic diseases and all of that. Right, but how does a person know if they have visceral fat? Exactly. So one of the things that I like to use is, so first of all, you should be doing your annuals. You should be checking your blood work. You should be checking your vitals, checking what your cholesterol levels are, your sugar levels, and all of that.
How often should we do this?
You should be doing it every year. Every year? Every year. Okay. At least once a year. Okay. Whether you have a condition or not, because this is how you catch things very quickly. But at home, there's something called the waist to hip ratio that I absolutely love, because sometimes as women, we're vain. There's really nothing wrong, but we think there's something going on. A simple waist to hip ratio where you take the measurement of your waist and then your hips and you divide that. If you just go to Google and just type in waist to hip ratio, a simple chart comes up. So based on the figure you get, you'll know if this is something to be worried about or not. So that's a very simple way to just check that.
Okay, so when you check the waist, your waist measurement and then the hip one, you divide or you
Yes, you divide. So you divide your waist, the measurement of the waist by the hips, and then it'll give you like a 0 point something to 1 point something. You just check that value on the chart that comes up on the internet, and that kind of tells you if you need to be worried or not. Because you can't be slim, and that's another mistake people make. Yeah. You can be slim and still have a decent amount of visceral fat that you need to actually worry about.
Okay. Yeah. Now let's talk about our nutrition. Yes. What do we need to, what would you advise in terms of our nutrition to help, to avoid, this stubborn fat?
So it usually comes down to a number of things. People always want one thing. There's no one thing. It really comes down to the quality and the quantity of your nutrition. So quality in terms of trying to avoid as much as possible what we call ultra-processed, highly palatable foods.
Ultra-processed.
Yes. Okay. So before we just used to say avoid processed foods, but not all processed foods are bad. Because even rice is processed to some degree. It isn't bad for you. Gari is processed to some degree. It isn't bad for you. So what we want to minimize, highly processed, ultra-palatable. Those foods that when it hits your tongue, Like there's just this,
that
it gives you this joy, you know. I'm a sweet tooth myself.
Okay.
It's like the sugar rush and all of that.
Give us a few examples.
Like ice cream,
ooh, okay,
pizza. Me too. And I'm not saying you don't have these things. You just can't be having them every day. Even suya. I'm sorry, don't hate me. You need to be very careful with things like that.
Hey,
pastries. I know. Pastries, things that are. It's usually high in a combination of fat, sugar, and salt. We need to be careful with those. Some of these things contain trans fat. Trans fat has really, a lot of manufacturers have stopped using it. It's been banned in lots of countries, but some still contain trans fat. Trans fat does allow us to store fat in the abdominal region. They're high, again, like I said, in fat, sugar, salt. So that means they're high in calories. And at the end of the day, fat storage is about excess calories. So it's excess energy. When you are taking in more food than you need to maintain your weight, the excess amount is going to be stored as fat in the body.
Yes.
So we're consistently consuming these highly processed, ultra-palatable foods that are high in calories. You're going to have excess energy and your body is going to store it. So you want to minimize those as much as possible. You want to make sure that you're eating mostly a whole food diet. Very controversial. We think, oh, don't eat rice, don't eat swallow, those things are bad for you. Those things aren't bad for you. Some of them are fantastic. For example, our body needs them. Gari is fantastic. We talk about, oh, we want probiotics and things like that. You can find those in fermented foods like gari, like fufu.
Probiotics, right? Really?
Yeah. Oh, wow. So those things are good for you. The problem is usually the quantity. So that's where we come to the quantity of the food.
Now let's go into that because, to be honest, we can eat for Africa. Now, we've had a lot of experts come on the show and talk about portion control, but I really do not think that it can be overemphasized, right? Because it also helps us to, put our weights and our diets in check. It helps us also control, our calorie levels and our cholesterol levels in our bodies as well. So let's talk about, the portions that we need to, look out for. We need to, in helping us, with our diet.
Right. So there are many ways to go about portion control, but there are two things that I would give now as a tip. The first is to use smaller plates.
Smaller plates?
This is smaller plates.
How small?
It can even be so not the regular big size plates that we use to serve food, so maybe like the medium size.
Okay.
So whatever plate you're using right now, just use something smaller. It doesn't have to be, don't make large changes, just something smaller than that. Okay. So that's one thing you can do, because the truth is, whatever food you put on your plate, there's a tendency to finish it even after you're full.
Very true, very true.
But if you use a smaller plate, you're going to dish on smaller food, and then there's going to be time for you to think, am I full? Do I actually want more? So that's the first thing. Second thing is then take that plate, divide it into three. So first, divide it into two halves. Take the first half and fill that with vegetables. If you like salads, fine. If you don't, that's fine. It can be your local vegetable soup. I am a Yoruba girl. I love eforiro, so I'm usually going to put some kind of eforiro there. So let half of your plate be vegetables. Then the other half, divide that into two, protein on one side and carbs on the other side. So that's a very simple way to start approaching portion control.
Okay, thank you so much. This was very short, simple, and, quick, easy steps that we could, look out for. First off, identifying, where the fats are, and most importantly, diets, food portion control.
The quality and
quantity. So much, And we'll continue this conversation next week with another myth-busting topic, right?
Yes,
fantastic.
Definitely.
All right, and I hope that you did not just hear it, but you listened. And so right now, if you're in the kitchen and you're about to dish food portion, it's, So, and that's it right on the nutrition segment. We're going to a quick break, people. The show continues shortly.